How can you cash out anonymously? That's exactly what we're going to take a detailed look at in today's video, because there are still a few possibilities, even though MiCA, etc. Everything is buzzing around. So let's check that out in detail. Additionally, of course, we'll briefly look at the current market situation, which is finally a bit better. And you'll also get a crypto trading setup on top of that. I would say let's not waste any time. We'll see each other after the intro. Now new. Uptrend VIP trading. Your opportunity to copy the signals of two profit traders for free. They managed to grow an account from $4,000 to $30,000 within 2 months. The results in the group are also impressive. All you need for this is a deposit of $100 into your BingX account. You can find all further information below in the description. Let's quickly start with the heat map. Yes, so we can definitely note that this looks quite solid. So partially even almost 6% in the positive as far as Solana is concerned here. By the way, if you look at this chart, it's absolutely wild. So much for the topic of those thought to be dead. The chart looks really impressive. If you compare that now, for example, with Ethereum, yes, that's our perennial issue. But also Bitcoin with nearly 3% in the positive, that already looks quite solid. As I said, the crypto trading setup will come at the end, because currently, I can tell you, you can make some nice trades. That would have been the case the day before yesterday, or even yesterday. And with that, we're directly on the topic. First of all, many thanks for the clicks on yesterday's video. It went up again. Several people also wrote in the comments that the video from 2 days ago was strangely not shown. Yes, happy profit trading to everyone who checked out my channel, because this trade was really nice. But there were also opportunities yesterday which was included in the video, for example. 125 likes, maybe we'll hit the 200 mark today. I'm very curious. By the way, with a like, which is completely effortless and free for you, you also boost the algorithm. So feel free to either write a comment below or leave a free like. By the way, we've also reached a small milestone. We have reached 10,500 subscribers. And at this point, if you're watching the first video now, this channel is about crypto news. Honest, fact-based, transparent, without hype, plus a daily trading setup, so everything you need. If you're interested, then subscribe for free now and activate the bell so you don't miss any important information. A warm welcome to all the newcomers. And now let's continue directly. And with that, we come to the core topic of today's video. And now I'll show you various ways to cash out anonymously. Important, this is not about supporting any criminal activities. I want to make that very clear right away. Pay taxes in the country where you live. That's it. End of message. Nevertheless, we must not forget, crypto is indeed meant for the whole thing. Anonymity, freedom, etc. To support all these topics, And this is in regard to MiCA. I've reported on it. Feel free to click in here. Or also DAC8, which makes the whole thing much more stringent. And by the way, starting early next year, it applies. Feel free to click in here. This has also caused quite a stir because it's absolute control. In any case, let's dive in now to see what possibilities there are. And I was quite surprised at first because non-KYC exchanges with withdrawal options. Okay. So in the past, there were, let's say, smaller exchanges like KuCoin. KuCoin is no longer small. But today, for example, it's still possible with MEXC. And if you take a look here, I've specifically pulled out an article. There seems to be the possibility with a fast withdrawal that you can, for example, withdraw up to $500 without having to provide any verification. Now, one might question this whole variant a bit because you are still, after all, in the crypto space. So, of course, you can withdraw from the exchange, like MEXC as an example, in a decentralized manner. But you still need the appropriate intermediary. But for the sake of completeness, I have briefly shown this variant again. The probably most well-known variant, which most people know and perhaps have already used, are the ATMs. Now, it should be mentioned that this is also being increasingly restricted because the KYC obligation is also advancing more and more here. Another topic now is, let me give you an example. I know because I was recently at a trade fair in Poland. In Poland, can you theoretically withdraw money without KYC? I can't say if it was up to a certain amount. Often it's then 1,000 euros as an example. That's where it starts. You don't get euros there, but zloty. So that means you have to exchange them back into euros, which of course involves exchange fees. So these machines, yes, should sometimes be approached with caution. Yeah, because for one, you don't know how current the Bitcoin rate is, where the exchange is happening. Or also, if you deposit USDT. Now, that would be excluded. But again, how is the exchange fee adjusted from dollars to euros? So I can imagine, without the offending any particular machine operator, that perhaps an extra euro or two is being earned there. Now, there are various websites where you can easily pull some basic data. So let's take an example. If we look here, for instance, Parma, I know, for example, that there is a machine there. If we select here now, interestingly, the import operation is not displayed at all. Let's just take one example. Let's say this one here, and then you can, for example, also select from the list, okay, this is, for instance, in Magaluf, there's one, of course, a stronghold of the English, which makes sense. Here we have Bitcoin as an example, where you can also sell, for example, that is also possible. Or alternatively, you can buy accordingly. So, for example, everything else here cannot be sold. If you then go to details here again, then you can pull various information here. For example, I have to check myself now here. You have, for instance, the limits for verification. So in this case, for example, these are again the obligatory 1,000 euros. Anything below that you could withdraw like this. So as you already noticed, these ATMs also have a few downsides. The question is, what are the exchange fees? And on the other hand, of course, you have to travel there first. Sure, you can combine it with a vacation, but otherwise, when you factor in travel time, etc., if you calculate everything, whether it pays off, well, who knows? You have to see. And you can also strongly assume that the KYC obligation is increasingly coming into focus there as well. What also exists, although perhaps to be approached with some caution, are P2P or peer-to-peer platforms. There are various possibilities, meaning provider A offers you, hey, listen, pay me in crypto. And in return, you get, for example, an Amazon gift card, just as an example. If you want to cash out now, you have to see if there are options, for example, in person, so that you can meet, and then you might not need KYC here. However, heute, with such topics, I can only give you the tip to give. On the one hand, it's again a question of the exchange rate. So what's happening right now? Like that? So you always have to keep an eye on how the rate is. I would strongly claim that we are currently over 74K. Wait, those are euros. Okay, I take it all back. But as I said, it's best to meet in public places and so on. So yes, as I said, it's an option. Never send everything in advance. Good. I strongly assume that these users are also verified, but we know it too. On other sales platforms, whether it's eBay and the like. There's still a lot of nonsense going on, so yes. But as I said, there are several platforms, for example, hodl. But there are several such peer-to-peer platforms where you can also trade. And with that, we come to my third and final option, where I can also say, well, it works. It's personally tested. So, for example, I have never tried a peer-to-peer platform. However, the topic with the cards, there are cards. And you should note that some are without KYC, some with soft KYC, and some with regular KYC. Often these banks are located, but also, for example, somewhere abroad. So, no idea. Somewhere in Timbuktu or elsewhere, then. The big advantage is that it's not a bank located somewhere in the EU. But as I said, a very clear message here, it's not about any tax avoidance or anything like that. If we now take a look at the various possibilities here, then you have, for one thing, two options. So I specifically picked out this provider, and there is, for example, one is the virtual, namely the silver card, as it is called here. You can also see here the various parameters, what you can spend in some form. For example, a single transaction of 5K, meaning you can't spend more than that. And you have a monthly spend limit of 100K. Most people should be able to manage with that. You can then add this card, since it is virtual, easily to Google Pay and Apple Pay. And here, an important message. We are talking about a soft KYC that you need. So, not a regular KYC. If you then say, yes, but I would like a physical card, that is also possible, namely with the gold card. And there you see, again, the limit is indeed higher, also concerning individual transactions. However, this is with regular KYC. So that's a very clear message at this point. I have researched for you. The bank is located far outside the EU. Everyone must decide for themselves where they want to share their data accordingly. As mentioned, these cards are established. They work. And I personally find it a very clean option that can be used accordingly. So, as mentioned, there are enough people out there. They are well beyond their annual holding period for cryptos and simply say, hey friends, I want to spend my cryptos as anonymously as possible. And this is indeed a welcome option for that. So, I did some research, and around 8,000 to 10,000 people are already registered as members. I strongly assume that they are also using the cards accordingly. So, the whole thing is running. But there's something else, especially for everyone who says, yes, okay, good, but I don't want to buy such a card right away. Can I try it out as well? Yes, that's possible too, with so-called gift cards. That means if you want to shop online in any form, you see here examples like Netflix, Spotify, Amazon, and so on, you can do that too. There should be over 150 different shops. And then you can, through this platform, and you have no obligation to buy or anything, you can just do it there. Create this gift card, then insert it at Amazon, for example, and buy your things accordingly. So for trying it out, I personally find it a great option where you also have the alternative. And by the way, these cards are completely without KYC. You can then go ahead and say, okay, I'll create the card and then I load it, for example, to H&M, IKEA, Airbnb. You can see the range. So there should be something for everyone. That should cover everything on the topic of cashing out, anonymous, and less anonymous options. Feel free to write in the comments what you think about it, or if you have perhaps already used one or the other option. Maybe you've already used an ATM or the P2P solution, or perhaps you also use the SwipeX cards. So you can just check that out. Otherwise, I've placed all the links below for you from all three options. And if you're interested, just click through them. As I said, it's meant to be purely informative. Now let's move on to trading. Just briefly, if you're looking for a cool exchange to trade on, I can recommend Bitfinex. I use it myself, so in the account that I manage for someone else and also show you transparently. So if you're interested, check the description. You can sign up, register, and then theoretically start right away. There is also a deposit bonus, or rather several, including a trading bonus if you reach a certain volume and so on and so forth. It would go beyond the scope here, so I'll just display it for you in parallel, then you can check it out for yourself. But as I said, I would say the exchange is quite capable, also very simply structured. Maybe we should also do some live trading or something like that. As I said, check it out for yourself. Now let's take a look. Yes, Bitcoin is gaining strength again. So if we take a look here, I mentioned it 2 days ago. No, yesterday I told you about it. It was here. This big pump. Then I also said, hey, you can go short nicely again. Hopefully you did that. And even yesterday, there were quite a few opportunities here. So I need to check. My trade also hit the take profit with about 20% in profit. So that's really nice. And if you look here, yes, even up here, there's definitely volume, which I can imagine. So I currently have a Bitcoin trade open again because I just looked at the vector candle one formed and I thought it would be picked up, but I'll show you that again in trading view, definitely. I can well imagine that this area up here will be targeted again. It's the weekend, traditional markets are closed, and we have pure. The market makers are in play. Let's take another quick look at the daily view. Well, the market makers really have a bit of free play here now. So it's quite conceivable that this volume area, which stands out the most, might be targeted again. It might be smart to place 1 or 2 limit orders here. But there's also an area up here that could definitely be targeted. Now, a quick note for all day traders. So yes, we're always interested in what's happening in short time frames. I showed this here yesterday. Yes, this area was simply not revisited. That's just how it is at the moment. So there's nothing you can do. In the worst case, the trade just doesn't get picked up. It's still better than it dropping like a stone, right? And in the best case, you end up getting liquidated. In any case, as I said, this area is out. However, I picked another one yesterday, namely this one. Because here too, you could see there was another retest. So it was picked up there as well. I think I was a bit over. I went in here, but I looked at it and thought, okay, there's movement here. There was movement at the same level, and especially here, there was massive volume. There was another test here as well. So that was indeed a strong support area. And then I placed the limit order here. And yes, wait, what can I say? Well, it was certainly nice. It ran up nicely to this point. But then I waited again because this was, well, a big one, vector candle. And what did we learn there? It's relatively likely that they will be picked up again. And what happened? First, it danced around a bit here. I then said, okay, I have here. At the base, below or just above, I placed another limit order, which was logically picked up. And then you see here, it was a good entry again, which you could take advantage of. And then it continued upwards here. Now I would keep an eye out on the whole thing for now. As I said, you saw it on the liquidation heat map. You can, for example, place a limit order further down where this large limit area is, which might be quite attractive for the market makers, and then set a take profit, for example, in the upper area. Otherwise, I would just wait for now. Yes, generally speaking, the weekend is always a bit quieter, but in the current market phase, that doesn't necessarily mean much. So it can also very easily happen that the market suddenly turns again, that Trump comes up with the idea to release some news. So I also consider it, keep an eye on what is happening in the short or medium term over the weekend. Let's continue looking at Ethereum in the weekly view. Well, so we do have more volume down here, and up here, there's basically nothing anymore. So that's also a big question, how things will proceed from here. So this is a consolidation, a sideways movement. Sure, it's tied to Bitcoin, but there's really no significant up or down movement. If we now also look at the 3-day view, you see it similarly. So yes, up here is of course a volume area that one could say is attractive. The brightest glow is down here. Yes, that would be right at the base. Let's hope we don't march down there. But who knows? And this entire block is completely full. And that's what we see here in the 4 hours view. So the chart hasn't really recovered since there was this major setback. With the penalty cells, and even though the whole thing was resolved again, you see here, okay, there was a pump, but it felt like 3/4 of what came up here. But just to return alone to this volume area, it would be important for us to find our way back here, or rather, sustainably beyond it. But it doesn't look like that at all right now. So here again, a vector candle down again. Then it was retrieved halfway or even 3/4 again. And now it almost seems again as if we are tilting downwards here. Yes, we'll have to wait and see. So I would say it's important, of course, that this area down here holds, or rather this area first and foremost. So we had the testing here twice, once here, once here. That would be important, of course, that it provides support around 1418. But then the big question remains, how? Does it continue with, or, well, actually Bitcoin is the dinosaur. How does it proceed here? Last look at XRP, yes. So here too we see the heat map is more or less empty, except for this block up here. I could well imagine that it will be targeted. You can watch and see if I'm right. So that this volume area here is still picked up. But otherwise, overall, it's not really that much. The most intense movement. The only thing I find very positive is this is the only token where the vector candle wasn't completely picked up again, but rather the support was already very strong from the middle. And the bulls have moved everything upwards again. And here too we should now look to get over this zone. I'll show you that again in TradingView. There was also a question in the comments yesterday, and you can see that exactly here. So yes, we had the last high here. If we consider Thursday now, and that should be the goal. We see here, so let's zoom in a bit, then you can see it too. And you can see how it is tested on point repeatedly. We were here. And also here with the small wick, there was another test of this high, but it didn't hold. And then it continued downwards. Here we had another, let's call it a slight test. And now we're just lingering around here. And that can become quite interesting, because if we sustainably break through this high again, which should be the first goal, then we have possibly the great chance to finally break out of this overarching downtrend here. And on the other hand, that it logically continues upwards. Well, I have to say what XRP is currently doing, the price is fighting. That can indeed be quite positive, but it logically depends on what happens with Bitcoin. Or, well, traditional markets are currently out, but what news might come in over the weekend? And what will that move again? That should be it for today. I am very curious. Feel free to write in the comments what is your opinion on the topic of cashing out. And otherwise, feel free to leave a free like if you enjoyed this video. Otherwise, I can give you a tip. A few days ago, I made a video here. This is not a bear market. There are still factors active that still apply now, which you should definitely check out. Take a moment to check out this video briefly. Otherwise, we'll see each other tomorrow in the next update. Until then, all the best. Bye.